Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you own a home in La Jolla or anywhere along coastal San Diego, you already know the deal. The environment here is absolutely gorgeous, right? But man, it can be completely brutal on your property. Today, we're putting together the ultimate no-nonsense playbook for building a fence that actually survives the Pacific coast. We're going to empower you with the exact knowledge you need to protect both your property and your wallet from the unique elements we face out here. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering the coastal challenge, cost factors, contractor questions, rules and red tape, a material breakdown, and finally, neighbor laws.
All right, Section 1, the coastal challenge and why geography matters.
When it comes to fencing in coastal San Diego, the environment itself is essentially the villain of our story. You're constantly battling this heavy salt air blowing right off the ocean, not to mention incredibly tough, unpredictable terrain. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact problem you'll run into when you start gathering bids. Picture this comparison. On one side, you have what we'll call the inland contractor. They might hand you a bid that looks significantly lower, but the devil is really in the details here. They're often using standard galvanized zinc hardware. Well, once that zinc is exposed to the heavy La Jolla marine layer, the salt air literally eats it alive in a matter of months. Suddenly, you've got bleeding rust stains running down your brand new fence. Plus, these inland crews usually just aren't prepared for the dense, rocky soil or loose sandstone we have on the coast. On the flip side, we have the coastal contractor. This is your true professional. They use marine-grade stainless fasteners or heavily coated hardware that can actually withstand that salt. And just as importantly, they show up equipped with the heavy-duty augers and machinery actually required to dig post holes in our tough coastal sandstone, not just standard shovels. That shortcut bid isn't a deal. It's a total disaster waiting to happen.
Moving on to Section 2, cost factors, pricing beyond the footprint.
So, one of the absolute biggest, most frustrating traps in this entire process is hidden costs. Listen, if a company gives you a quote over the phone for a La Jolla property sight unseen, that's not an estimate. That is a highly dangerous guess. Let's break down exactly why that is. A reliable contractor absolutely must physically walk your lot, because all of these hidden variables drastically change the final price tag. Sure, total linear footage matters, but what about the specific soil conditions? Are they hitting hard rock or shifting sandstone? What about the slope of the terrain? Fencing a completely flat lot down in the village is an entirely different labor cost than trying to step custom panels up a 45-degree hillside in Mount Soledad. And we can't forget about old fence tear-out and disposal. Just imagine the absolute nightmare of a contractor showing up and realizing they have to haul 500 pounds of rotting old wood up a narrow set of outdoor stairs just because they didn't check the site access beforehand. That right there is exactly how your bill skyrockets by 30% on day 2. This is precisely why you demand they walk the property before they ever hand you a final number.
Section 3, contractor questions, or as I like to call it, the interrogation. This section is the absolute core of our playbook today. You need to know how to expose weak bids fast, and you do that by asking every single estimator the exact same rapid-fire questions when they visit your home. The first one, will you handle the permit application, and do you use marine-grade hardware? Most significant fence work around San Diego actually requires city approval, and honestly, navigating local bureaucracy is a huge headache, so a trustworthy pro taking that off your plate is a massive green flag for a professional operation. And just like we discussed, listen super closely to their answer about the hardware. If they don't instantly say stainless steel or heavy-duty coastal coatings, and instead start talking about generic heat-plated screws, you just need to respectfully show them the door. Next up, do you subcontract the labor, and how deep are your footings? Now, subcontracting isn't inherently evil, but you need to know exactly who is going to be working in your backyard. If the company just sold the job and farmed it out to the lowest bidder, you completely lose accountability if those custom cuts on your hillside start failing 6 months later. You really want an in-house crew. And as for footings, those intense coastal winds and shifting hillside soils demand deep, highly secure concrete footings. It's totally non-negotiable. If you're on a slope where panels have to be carefully stepped or custom cut to follow the grade, shallow posts will inevitably leave you with a leaning, failing fence the second we get a major winter storm.
So, the crucial point here is this exact number, $1,000. Under California law, any project where labor and materials total $1,000 or more legally requires the contractor to hold a C13 fencing license. And let's be real, in Southern California, $1,000 for materials and labor barely covers a minor repair, let alone a new build. This basically makes the C13 license a universal requirement for your project. Always ask for their state license number and actually verify it online. It's your ultimate legal and financial safety net.
Section 4 brings us to rules and red tape, navigating local law. You know, ignorance of local regulations just isn't an excuse, and getting this wrong can lead to some brutal fines, or even being forced by the city to physically tear down a brand new fence. It happens. Look at these bureaucratic hurdles. San Diego enforces some very strict height limits, especially in front yards and near intersections where driver visibility is a safety issue. If your property happens to be near the bluff edge, you might be facing a pretty rigorous Coastal Commission review. If you're in a planned community, you've got HOA architectural committee approvals to secure before a single post hole is dug. And here's a massive one, the California Building Code for pool enclosures. This is a huge liability issue. If you have a pool, the safety barriers have highly exact height, gap, and gate latch specifications designed to literally save lives. A standard perimeter fence might not cut it if that pool sits close to the property line. You absolutely cannot leave these specs up to a contractor's memory. They have to confirm current codes directly with the city.
All right, Section 5, Material Breakdown and Coastal Durability.
Finding the perfect fence really means balancing your upfront aesthetics with long-term survival in that harsh marine layer. Now, what's really interesting about this is how different materials battle the elements. Let's look at the trade-offs of the top 3. First, wood, specifically redwood and cedar. It actually has high coastal resistance because it naturally fights off rot and insects, giving you that classic, beautiful privacy look. But the maintenance is high. You gotta seal and stain it regularly so the relentless sun and salt don't dry it out and split the boards. Then there's vinyl. High coastal resistance, handles the marine layer beautifully without fading or warping, and the maintenance is incredibly low. You literally just wash it down with a garden hose. Easy, right? Finally, aluminum. It gives you that elegant, open look of wrought iron, but because it's finished with a protective powder coat, it fights off salty moisture and won't rust out like bare steel. Ultimately, it's all about choosing what fits your personal maintenance tolerance and your property's vibe.
Finally, Section 6, Neighbor Laws. Good neighbors and next steps.
Of course, your fence doesn't just affect you. It physically borders someone else's property, which brings us to the logistics and legalities of sharing a boundary line. If you share a property line, you absolutely need to understand the Good Neighbor Fence Law. This is a California law that actually presumes adjoining landowners will equally share the costs of building, maintaining, or replacing a shared boundary fence. Sounds great, right? But here is the critical part and a common trap that ruins neighborly relationships. The law requires 30 days written notice to your neighbor before you actually incur those costs. You can't just build it over the weekend and hand them a bill on Monday. This is exactly why getting a detailed, itemized quote from an independent professional is so valuable. It acts as an objective, clear tool to smooth over those potentially awkward financial conversations with the neighbor next door. It shows them exactly what the project involves, why coastal materials are necessary, and why it costs what it does.
Let's move to installation day and see how this builds out. For a flawless process, just follow these practical steps. Step 1, your pro contractor must call Dig Alert. This is a free service that marks public underground utility lines so the crew doesn't accidentally smash your water, gas, or electrical lines while digging deeply into that sandstone. Step 2. On day 1, you, the homeowner, need to be on-site to physically walk the property lines with the crew and confirm the layout. And Step 3, while you certainly don't need to micromanage the crew and hover over them all week, you must remain reachable by phone. Being a ghost during the build leads to guesswork, and guesswork leads to disaster. If they hit a hidden rock formation or have a sudden question about a property marker, you want to be able to resolve it instantly so the project doesn't stall out.
Wow, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. From the absolute necessity of marine-grade hardware, to navigating rigid California building codes, to avoiding those sneaky hidden terrain costs. So I want to leave you with this final critical question to consider. Will your next fencing investment just look good on day 1, or is it truly built to survive the Pacific Coast? Don't settle for a contractor who's just guessing on the phone. Empower yourself with this playbook, ask the tough questions, and hire a true coastal expert who knows this unique terrain inside and out. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy building!